butcher of Rostov, Andrei Romanovich Chikatilo. Born October 16, 1936. In September 1978, Chikatilo moved to Shakhte, a small coal mining town near Rostov-na-Donu, where he committed his first documented murder. On December 22nd, he lured a 9-year-old girl named Yelena Zakutnova to an old house which he had secretly purchased. He attempted to rape her, but failed to achieve an erection. When the girl struggled, he choked her to death and stabbed her body, ejaculating in the process of knifing the child. Chikatilo then dumped Zakutnova's body in a nearby river. Despite evidence linking Chikatilo to the girl's death, spots of the girl's blood were found in the snow near Chikatilo's house, and the witness had given police a detailed description of a man closely resembling Chikatilo, who she had seen talking with Zakutnova at the bus stop where the girl was last seen alive. A 25-year-old named Alexander Kravchenko, who as a teenager had served a jail sentence for the rape and murder of a teenage girl, was arrested for the crime and subsequently confessed to the killing. He was tried for the murder in 1979. At his trial, Kravchenko retracted his confession and maintained his innocence, stating his confession had been obtained under extreme duress. Despite his retraction, he was convicted of the murder and sentenced to 15 years imprisonment, the maximum possible length of imprisonment at that time. Under pressure from the victim's relatives, Kravchenko was retried and eventually executed for the murder of Yelena Zakutnova in July 1983. Following Zakutnova's murder, Chikatilo was only able to achieve sexual arousal and orgasm through stabbing and slashing women and children to death. And he later stated the urge to relive the experience overwhelmed him. Chikatilo committed his next murder in September 1981, when he tried to have sex with a 17-year-old boarding school student named Larissa Tkachenko in the forest near the Don River. When Chikatilo failed to achieve an erection, he became furious and battered and strangled her to death. As he had no knife, he mutilated her body with his teeth and a stick. Following Biryuk's murder, Chikatilo no longer attempted to resist his homicidal urges. Between July and December 1982, he killed a further 6 victims between the ages of 9 and 19. He established a pattern of approaching children, runaways and young vagrants at bus or railway stations, enticing them to a nearby forest or other secluded area and killing them, usually by stabbing, slashing, and eviscerating the victim with a knife. Although some victims, in addition to receiving a multitude of knife wounds, were also strangled or battered to death. Many of the bodies found bore striations of the eye sockets. Pathologists concluded the injuries were caused by a knife, leading investigators to the conclusion the killer had gouged out the eyes of his victims. Chikatilo's adult female victims were often prostitutes or homeless women who could be lured to secluded areas with promises of alcohol or money. Chikatilo would typically attempt intercourse with these victims, but he would usually be unable to get an erection, which would send him into a murderous fury, particularly if the woman mocked his impotence. He would achieve orgasm only when he stabbed the victim to death. His child victims were of both sexes. Chikatilo would lure these victims to secluded areas using a variety of ruses, usually formed in initial conversation with the victim, such as promising them assistance or company, with the offer to show the victim a shortcut, a chance to view rare stamps, films or coins, or with an offer of food or candy. He would usually overpower these victims once they were alone, tie their hands behind their backs with the length of a rope, and then proceed to kill them. On August 20, 1991, after completing the interrogation of Chikatilo and having completed a reenactment of all the murders at each crime scene, Chikatilo was transferred to the Stepskava Institute in Moscow for a 6-day psychiatric evaluation to determine whether he was mentally competent to stand trial. Chikatilo was analyzed by senior psychiatrist Dr. Andrei Tkachenko, who declared him legally sane on October 18. In December 1991, details of Chikatilo's arrest and brief summary of his crimes was released to the newly liberated media by police. On October 14th, the court reconvened and the judge read the list of murders again, not finishing until the following day. On October 15th, Chikatilo was found guilty of 52 of the 53 murders and sentenced to death for each offense. Chikatilo kicked his bench across his cage when he heard the verdict and began shouting abuse. He was offered a final chance to make a speech in response to the verdict, but remained silent. Upon passing final sentence, Judge Leonid Akobzhanov made the following speech. Taking into consideration the monstrous crimes he committed, this court has no alternative but to impose the only sentence that he deserves. I therefore sentence him to death. On January 4th, 1994, Russian President Boris Yeltsin refused a last-ditch appeal for clemency. On February 14th, Chikatilo was taken to a soundproofed room in Novocherkassk and executed by a single gunshot behind the right ear.